All right, so welcome to the Creative Talks Africa sessions. We are privileged to have an amazing panel of amazing people from across the country and the continent. Tonight, we're going to be talking about creativity, crisis, and the pandemic. You know, we are in the midst of a very disturbing crisis, and that is something that we thought that as people come together and have a conversation around it. I have an amazing team of amazing people that are going to share a little bit about their views and what they think about this time and how it has affected their creativity and innovation as people, as human beings. I would just say you can start introducing yourself.
My name is Allan, creative director at ChopHouse Studio, media consultant or everything, musician, all around creative. So, yeah. Shout out to our sponsors, Borderwork, by the way.
Yes.
Shout out to those guys. Creative director, Borderwork 2, we're in this space, innovative. We'll have somebody tell us more about that. That's my boss. So.
Yeah, sure. So you can also share.
My name is Jànos Bisasso, and I'm in charge of operations here at Wabwire, where we find ourselves in this very genuine round of people here today, who I want to thank for making time for being in.
Yeah.
And perhaps I can hand on.
Yeah, sure. Lesham, can you
My name is Lesham Kenogo, and I am a producer of TV series, events, and yeah, pretty much. So I make TV shows for a living.
How is that?
It's fun. It's not what I thought it would be, but it's like so much more.
So what's the hardest thing? Compared, especially right now, there is no with the coronavirus and stuff, what's happening? How is that happening?
Well, obviously everything was kind of put on hold because we weren't able to film because we were pursuing a contract of another season of a TV show we've been doing. So we did 4 seasons and we wanted another season, and they're like all the sponsors just went on hold, and just everything. TV station that we wanted to air it went on hold, so we're just waiting. We're just waiting for things to come back so that we can be like, hey, give us your money.
So when you're making a TV show, what is the hardest part in that process, the whole process? What is the hardest part for you in making a TV series?
The hardest part in making a TV series is getting someone to fund it, getting someone to buy your product, and at a budget that's agreeable, because a lot of TV series are made at throwaway prices. How can we have movies that are made with $100, and that's like a complete entire movie? I don't even know how they got anything, including a camera, to film that entire thing. So that's the major issue here.
Yeah, so of course, all of us are innovators and entrepreneurs, and one of the problems that we've been affected with is actually the pandemic, and that's COVID-19, and I'm pretty sure it has affected all our businesses. But how has it affected you, and where do you see yourself in this whole crisis? I'll start with you. Maybe you could talk a bit about that.
I think maybe if I distinguish sort of my personal and my professional life. In terms of my personal life,
has it affected you?
It has affected me probably most so on the fact that I've not been used to being limited in my mobility.
Yeah.
It is not that I'm angry with the situation. I'm very understanding of it. We must try to mitigate as much as possible if we don't want to have a big crisis. But it's new for me not to be able to divide my day into my own time, decide when I arrive at work, when I leave work, for instance.
Yeah.
So, yes. But in a professional sense, it has probably affected us more so.
Yeah.
And that is simply because anytime you are in a situation where people are dependent on you in form of employees, for instance, from day one, when you realize that there may be shortcomings in revenues or increased prices on your supply chain, you become very aware of the fact that you need to start making compromises, and you don't really want to let people go because you've spent a long time trying to build up a good team.
Yeah.
So it's been a time of compromise for sure, especially on the financial side, I would think. But interestingly enough, it has also been a time of change, and positive change at that. As a startup, we find ourselves in the situation where we're constantly running from day to day, trying to achieve our next goal. And in actual fact, at some time, would make sense to slow down a bit and gain some perspective of what you're doing and consolidate some processes. And we were certainly able to do that in this time. We were able to step off the accelerator slightly, implement some company structures, get the time to work on and really structure certain processes that just improve our quality and maybe also, more importantly, human interactions. Help build the communication, which usually suffers if you're trying to move too quickly. I'd say those are the single biggest effects.
Yeah, that's true.
How about yourself?
Myself, I think as a cultural producer and also creative director, a lot of things have actually been very much affected. When you think about how we are producing art, now we have to think about, the DNA of arts and culture production involves bringing people together, which actually is not happening. Because now we have to think of alternative ways of how to produce art, alternative ways of how to get creative people involved and engaged. And so now we are basically innovating around the digital space. And that's why we think things like live streaming shows, things like having webinars through the different digital platforms can allow us actually reach people. I mean, the DNA of the creative industry, like I said, it runs on making sure that people come together in order for them to actually be able to sustain a little bit of income, which unfortunately is not happening, So creatives have to think more deeply about how to generate income, how to distribute their creative services and products, And that's the dilemma that we are in. We are hoping that maybe through the constant innovation and constant thinking, we can actually be able to reach more people, and through things like these, conversations like the ones that we're having here, is one way we can be able to actually create awareness and get people to know what it is we are facing and how we are navigating those things. Maybe Lesham can say a little about how...
Yeah, another problem has been in the creative industry, most of us work on one job to the next. There's no culture of saving. Like most things, you make your money today, you invest it in something tomorrow, you make a short film or whatever you're doing. Most creatives make their money on the go. So when everything had to stop, it's like, where is it coming from? Where is this? We do, they call them gigs. Like, you go do like a festival and then you know that you're fine for like 2-3 months, and then you go do something else. Like, you plan your life like that. So once everything's been put to an end, you're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How can I adapt my skill to the crisis and to be relevant in this time? Yeah, that's really been how that's really been how I've been thinking this entire time. It's like, you've got to re-strategize.
That's what I'm saying. So like, the best thing is I realize, like, just as anything happens in life, it's all about adapting and surviving. Just 100%, a situation where, 100%. Just like a new president comes into power, you gotta adapt to survive to that. You go somewhere to live, you gotta adapt to survive. So now we're in the situation where we have to look at our lives and realize there are some things that just ain't necessary.
Yeah.
And they're just adding more chaos. So for me as a creative, I'm already in digital marketing. I'm into brand marketing. So for me, it's not too bad. Because now more companies need that digital work. More companies are moving towards the digital platform. So for us as marketers and branding and designers and stuff like that, it brings in more work for us.
So your skill was relevant to the crisis
already. So our skills right now, as
it's just a matter of accelerating that.
It's just like now I have more work, and I have to go pitch more people because I know right now we need to be online. Now everybody needs marketing online. Everybody needs their social media. So companies like the little mom and pop shops at the corner, now they were using word of mouth. They have to get online because now everybody's in the house, everybody's on the phone. They don't have nothing to do. If you introduce a new product right now, where's the best place you're gonna get it from? You go and sell it at social media. You're gonna take it to social media so people can see it.
Yeah.
Everybody's on YouTube.
I mean, for me, I've also been seeing we are very much using the digital platform or the digital market space to interact and socialize. But don't you think it breaks away the aspect of intimacy and the aspect of having to interact with clients other than just being behind the screen?
Intimacy is like, it's the whole world.
Yeah.
If it was just a company, you would be like, nah, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We understand. But it is the whole world. Everybody is going to adjust to this platform sooner or later.
Yeah.
I would agree.
So I can't say, oh, it's not intimate. I would want to be intimate, but doing what's happening in the world, I can't.
Yeah, Jànos, what do you think about that?
I tend to agree with Allan on that matter. I do feel that it's a new standard of communication, one that is having trouble penetrating our continent relatively quickly due to certain powers that be, and also just the sheer price of internet at the end of the day.
Exactly.
It's not that democratized amongst our people, so it will still take some more time for everybody to really feel comfortable with that as a platform that we really we are able to have intimate interactions on the way we do in person. I personally am also a believer, though, that's why I say tend to agree.
Yeah.
My favorite mode of communication is still the personal one. I feel there are things and emotions that can be conveyed. That
Better in
simply
person than they can ever be conveyed in a message or a call or an email, or it's not the same.
Yeah, it's not the same, but it's not like I don't want to do that. You see, it's not like I don't want to approach my clients and have that moment where we can sit down and have a meeting, maybe in a boardroom or something, and be like, hey, but I would like to do that. But during these circumstances of life, it can't happen.
Yeah, that's true.
But we can video talk and you can email. You know what I'm saying? That's what the whole point of adapting and surviving has to come in. We must take our emotions out of it and we look at ourselves as survival. Like we need to survive. You know? That's why I look at it.
And you, Lesham,
Exactly.
I mean, how do you think as a female creative entrepreneur, this period has been like for you in terms of how you distribute the kind of work that you do, in terms of accessing your customers, but not only that, but continuously creating?
So this time period, I've spent a lot of it also just on like reflecting on the kind of business I'm trying to build. I run a production company, and obviously just trying to see how to make sure my business is always relevant to the time, you know? And I've just been seeing the how important it is to have multiple sources of income if possible, even as an individual, you know, even as an individual, let alone a company, you know? So it's just when our show has been showing on TV, it's still been airing on TV, so we've just been using this time to try and like build our social media following and kind of like plan for future things as much as we can, and try to like keep our clients like, hey, we're still here, you know, we're working on things, catch you up.
So just out of interest, what would
something.
like a concrete example of that look like? How would you be able to keep somebody interested in these times?
We've just been trying to send texting, because for some of the clients that we talk to, we already are friends with someone. So you just keep that person like, hey, how's your COVID-19, just to show that you're both empathic to whatever is going on. And through that, usually they talk about their work life, like it's just inevitable. So they're like, yeah, man, our whole company's been shut down, you know, like, so you get to know why the conversation's kind of like gone quiet. It's kind of like a way of like getting information, but still being like kind and relatable to like the person and the situation that them and their company is going through, and really the whole world.
And I would say it's like, I don't feel like we're losing business per se, because everybody's in the same position. We are all stalled. You know what I'm saying? This thing is just, okay, like I said, feelings out of it.
Yeah.
You always say like, it's just, you just gotta figure it out. You can't just be like, if you stay in the house and be like, oh, you know, sooner or later you gotta move. You have to move. And if this is a time, like, I feel like we all needed a break in life at some point. And we got a break for 3 months.
Yeah, yeah.
We got a break. So for us, me as a creative, now I have way more ideas. I'm refreshing. I've got time to actually sit down and look at some projects with like serious focus without having to be running somewhere to go. You know what I'm saying? So now
That as well, actually, I've learned to prioritize.
Yeah. So I've learned a lot about myself. Even as a brand and as a business, I've got to learn a lot.
So we have to accept, as even though there have been a little bit of negative issues about the pandemic, it has allowed us to decompress, remove the leg from the acceleration thing, and just make sure that we feel everything, get to replan and reprioritize, get to think about what it is that works and what doesn't work, how do we get back more better, and how do we push for our creativity even much more, you know. I think that's really an amazing thing. But of course, all of you...
One more thing.
Yes.
I mean, me as well, I have this one.
Yes.
As a startup, and we are together in this, because our community, all that stuff.
Yeah.
On the other side, because I don't get to see the other side, me, I get to hand on the marketing. So like, what changes have you had to make?
I guess I can illustrate those. So our business is basically initially built around a battery as a service. So we have taken a significant amount of time and quite a lot of our money to develop a product that basically is a larger increment of electric storage that can be used in either things like electric mobility.
Yeah.
In this specific case, what the product we're rolling out to market with, the converted e-boda.
Yes.
But ultimately, it's just about democratizing energy. So this unit battery, basically, we see being used across the field. And we had always imagined that it would be in a subscription model. We would be able to make it available to people, and they would operate their own assets that maybe we have helped them to develop. What you'll find in a time of pandemic, though, is that people are not really looking to make long-term strategic buys. They're looking to get by on a day-to-day sort of level.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, it sort of helped us gain a better understanding of the market that surrounds our immediate office. You know, what are the daily needs?
Yeah.
So we're more in tune to those. I think that resonates with what you guys were saying earlier. We have a force to be more in tune with what was going on around us, and it led to us rolling out like a short-term rental business. So we have been giving out bikes now, for instance, on 3-hour basis, as opposed to, looking at our long-term revenue models. Which, are well and good, and I think do have a place in this country. But in a time of crisis, it's more about the essentials, and we realize that we have to cater to the essentials if we want to be helpful within our community.
Yeah.
So, as the pandemic, have you had to change up your whole life? Because I know when you started, you wasn't counting on no pandemic. We were all.
No.
What my question is, would you still be in a simple? What do you think you'll be in a better position if the pandemic didn't happen? Would you be in the position you're in right now? Because I don't
it's an impossible question to answer, to be honest. But there has, of course, also always been an interest to further scale our undertaking here, and that basically requires some strategic investment. And yes, let me say some sectors have benefited more, in this time, in terms of people wanting to invest, people assessing risk, and I think it's fair to say that mainly sort of digital and decoupled business models are the ones which stood out at this time. Let me just take Jumia as an example. Somebody who had spent a lot of time trying to organize logistics, last mile delivery, import, export, right? In this time of Corona, your company gains a lot of value because people will start using your service despite the fact that they may not have been interested beforehand, but they're now forced, to
and now they
do their
continue
shopping
being your
somewhere,
customers actually even after that.
And
speaking of which, Yanish, actually, because that brings in the aspect of what are some of the industries that have actually been boosted, and there's been a lot of talk of the delivery industry and also sort of like delivery, because then it does not involve me having to go here and here. And then you think about how this innovation that is actually coming out from crises is actually making life much more easier, because then you have the border work company coming in and trying to put in place sort of like a solution for people to be able to easily access bikes at a very affordable price and be able to move around. And I think that's also something that is coming, and something that COVID-19 has brought. We don't have to prioritize luxurious things that are actually going to cause us problems. You could actually have your own bike, ride and go to the market, shop and then come back, or you could just use someone's services, use border and all that stuff. Where do we see innovation going with after this post-pandemic? Do we see innovation going much more into delivery, much more into things like live stream, much more into things like that remove that personal touch?
Well, I definitely feel we've realized that there is a place for digital entertainment, digital work, I feel like this crisis has finally enabled like the older generation to see why us young people are always obsessed with the internet, right? In an age where everyone was forced to be on the internet or else, good luck, right? People have created like online award shows now. So there's like so much more online content. Like there's a bigger focus. So I definitely feel this will remain, like even after the pandemic, because people now have things they like, they're following, they're doing consistently. There's so many more like YouTubers, like people that have been dying to watch their stories. They're finally putting their stories out on the internet. They're not just gonna stop. So something has been created, and it's gonna stay.
That's the thing. A lot of everything is moving online and everything, but at the end of the day, we are going to end up losing like you guys were talking about the intimacy and stuff like that. But right now, like if I stay in my house and be on the internet all day and search, I can get my food delivered, I can get everything. You're not gonna worry about
especially I feel like
you're not gonna really worry too much about going outside, because in your mind now, even if you say every time you step outside, anytime somebody touches you, anytime somebody sneezes,
exactly, that's the problem.
That whole
that's
thing,
the problem.
It's going to be different for us.
So we're most isolated right now.
I feel like
in our bubbles.
The internet is going to boom, but us as human beings, we're going to be.
So should we advocate for sort of like having restraints while using these platforms that we think are actually helping us?
Well, I think we should learn to restrain ourselves. These platforms were never meant to do what they're currently doing, right? So we need to learn this is the amount I should consume. Like during this quarantine, I've also been reading and learning a lot about screen time and how much we spend and how it affects us, and how what we expose ourselves to on a daily basis will shape your thinking, which will shape your life. So just because I'm more aware of that, I'm really, really trying, and it's hard, because it's literally an addiction. It's like the biggest addiction. And people, because it's not as detrimental or as quickly detrimental to your life as like, something as instant as like certain drugs or whatever. So this one, people let it pass. They're like, no, it's just a phone, it's just a phone. But no, it's shaping your thinking. People are constantly trying to sell you things. So it's shaping what you view as healthy, what you view as beautiful, what you view as productive, what you view, because everyone's trying to sell you things all the time.
Yeah,
so you just have to.
I feel like it is a good thing and a bad thing that we.
You have to learn that you need a little bit less. You need to create a mental space that's away from all of the voices, to know who you really are, not who you think is out there.
For us as people that the other people that are not creative as we are, stay already in the internet. I think some people now are getting to go out and into nature, ride bikes, take some piece off, because like you can be on the internet all day, you're gonna get bored. So now you don't have nothing else to do. So basically, right now you are going to take a walk, speak to your neighbor or something. But at the end of the day, you still got the fear in your head. You're gonna be in your window like, okay, neighbor. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, everything has its own disadvantages and advantages.
Certainly, some things just can't be undone, and we have learned, to be more careful in some aspects, and it will take time. The way I've gotten used to it, it will take time to sort of get used to life after as well. I would imagine there will be some at least long-term changes within this year, because we have not yet reached the end, right?
But you guys think we're going to have another wave? Because I feel like they talk about another wave of corona coming.
Well, they're talking about another wave of corona based on the weather. So it is getting colder even here. I mean, it's been raining a lot.
So we all agree that actually this has come, there's been some innovation, there's been some creativity going on, and there's the aspect of resilience for all of us to keep pushing, to keep innovating around it and all that stuff. But while we're facing the COVID-19 pandemic, there was also another pandemic that actually came. I don't know whether you guys heard about the Black Lives Matter.
How can we not? How could we not?
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but this is a little bit sad. When I watched those videos, it was just really gripping. It was really sad. Like, I don't know. Did you watch some of those things that were doing the rounds on social media?
Me, I've seen that in person because that's what I grew up in.
Yeah.
So for me to see people react now, it doesn't really do nothing for me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because these things have been happening for so long. I'm glad that people have stood up. You know what I'm saying? And actually said, okay, we won't handle. But this thing's been going on for so long. Yeah. And for me personally, I feel like I'm speaking on racism from my perspective. So if I say something like, none of these guys that are saying Black Lives Matter never been slaves, or none of the white folks around have never owned a slave. You know what I'm saying? That's my opinion, because it is the truth. You know what I'm saying? You cannot live in the past that you never lived.
You cannot try and insert your current
you
self
cannot insert yourself
with your current ideals and then try and insert
we all
yourself
know
in the past.
all those things are bad. Every country has its history, and it has to go through it. You know what I'm saying? Those people went through the history. You know, things happened. You grow. But for me, most of the people I see, the people are looting and all that stuff.
Unfortunately, it can detract from the message, and
it takes from the message. And I can't say, I'm not saying I don't support Black Lives Matter, and I'm not about a Black Lives Matter person. I'm all about lives matter. All lives matter. You know what I'm saying? I know for right now we are focused on the Black Lives Matter, and that must, you know, we saw the videos, we've seen the stuff, it's happened.
Jànos, you must have watched some of the videos. You must have been awash with a lot of information during these past few days while we were battling with the pandemic. What's your take on what was happening in Europe? Because there's been a lot of defacing, and also as a person that is born in Germany, Ugandan, so you have that hybrid, you know. What do you take of that?
Let me start out by answering the question on the videos. They're also not new to me in that sense, you know, there have always been they've had a certain space, at least in the internet, one which maybe I also would always, would every now and again at least, you know, come across something. I think my challenge is this: I wish it wasn't so much of a discussion. You know, it's just
we've monopolized the conversation.
That all lives matter, and that you know the black life for some time seems to have still been less valuable, right? For me, that's kind of out of question. It's just, you know, it's a historic process that tends to take time. In most of our African countries here, we have roughly 50 years worth of independence that we can really sort of base our own identity on again.
That's true.
Colonialism did play a role. It's as simple as that. Debts of the continent do play a role, though maybe in some people's opinions we seem to be net creditors just on the wrong accounts. In any case, I can't tell you, I'm not an economist, but what I do see is that it's nice that we're being represented by so many people all over. Even in Germany, there are really frequent protests, you know, trying to speak up for our specific rights in this race topic. It's just unfortunate that, like I was saying earlier, there's much of a discussion about it. If we could sort of acknowledge that it's there and sort of tackle the systematic angle of it.
That's what I'm more interested about.
And this, activity on the streets somehow has, or at least doesn't always lead to systematic change.
It leads to pacifying.
It leads up even more. It leads, you know, more strict.
No, but activity in the streets leads to pacifying. They just want to give you a lollipop to make you stop crying.
So what have we seen on the streets? People are rioting, people are looting, people are going out there with placards and expressing how discomfort they are, and they're peaceful. These are peaceful protests. We're seeing artists doing murals and all that stuff, which is really amazing. I think, in a way, it allows us to actually show the powers that be that, look, this is what we think is actually happening, and this is the evidence that we have. We've been seeing these videos that have been doing rounds, and the question in the past that we've been seeing people defacing standing statues of racism and all that stuff, like people who were during the slave trade. Don't you think? Sorry?
If that's like you know, that's a slap in the face. For me, like, you can't. There's some level you have to go. Like that didn't even need to be there in the first place.
Yeah.
That should have been, those statues should have been taken away a long time ago.
Yeah.
Because now you have this thing and saying, okay, this guy owned something so and so, and he's getting, you know, recognition for that. I don't agree with that. I don't think the way they got taken out was, you know, the way they should have taken out. But I don't think.
And you know, the worst thing is actually that the people that we expect to protect us are the people that actually systematically keep
Well,
keep the racism like so hot on fire in Europe, you know.
We're in an age of misinformation. I think is one
100%.
thing we can say for
and
sure.
false freedom.
Yes. So it's so easy to take people who might be in the streets peacefully and sort of spark all sorts of conversation in the online world.
Yes,
and that's what I mean by I wish we weren't having this discussion. What are we truly discussing? Actually, because you asked the question earlier and I didn't answer it, let me go back to it. Experience from my personal life would be that friends who, you know, I got along with extremely well, who have never been, you know, sort of portrayed any form of racism towards me in all my time in Germany, in our time studying together, they would be naive to the fact that racism towards somebody like me might exist and might point out that it can go both ways. It has happened to me here as well, but I would say that specifically on the other side, there were more encounters. So just to get an idea of the balance. And they couldn't really imagine that there was real racism towards me because I speak very fluent German and, you know, I seem to be well integrated in that sense, right? And people usually don't question that sort of thing when they're around you. And there was an evening where basically we were at a function, at a sort of a graduation function, and there was a sort of a drunk student who walked up behind a friend of mine as we were in a conversation and whispered in her ear, you know what do you want with this nigger? Right? And then sort of moved on, and she sort of teared up instantly. And it's like, why can't we just ran after him, you know, trying to talk sense to somebody who's drunk, has no, how should I say? Me personally, I was less touched by the situation than she was.
That's what I'm
and
saying.
it was indicative to me of you know, the situation. It's like people somehow on the conscious level are not so aware of it, but like...
And when they do become aware, it's such an exaggerated
it's like, oh yes, you know,
reaction.
rather than, you know, I should say on the subconscious level, they're not aware of it, but yes. You know, that's where I want to get. That's the systematic part. I don't have all the answers, I can't lie to you, but it's where I see a challenge. And interestingly enough, these are the same sort of people they may not even notice. They may be asking you a question, for instance. They might ask you, you know, but where are you from? So if I answer that question with Berlin, you know somebody, on average, is going to be dissatisfied. The average German will be dissatisfied with the answer Berlin.
Which is a way of actually expressing racism.
So
you're not one of us.
I wouldn't say it's racism at all, but it can feel that way. But I personally don't quantify it as such, but it can feel that way. And I understand when other people feel touched badly by it, because at that point, you know, you're denying somebody their heritage. And you have to go further and further, and you know somebody's just trying to figure out where does the other color come from. Right? So, at the beginning, I would always, you know, in my early years back at university, I would always have a lot of time to elaborate for each and every individual, and after some time it became cumbersome. And I began to realize, wait, I don't want to have to, you know, sort of justify
who you are as a human being. And I think this is what gets people so much triggered, that I am a human being just as much as you are. You forget the history that is the reason as to why I'm here. And it's not because of my own making that I'm actually white or I'm black.
It's none of our making. It's just
we cannot judge people by their skin color to integrate them into communities. They are people. They deserve their rightfully in every community that they can. And I think this is something we need to...
For me, from experience that I've had with racism, and like I said, people might take this the wrong way. When I left here, I was 8, around 9. I went to the States. I was in school. When I started school, I got more I got more racist comments from Black Americans than I did from the white folks. You know what I'm saying? The white folks showed me love because they had that, you know, they had that curiosity. You know, you were a new person. I don't blame someone if they don't understand and they come and trying to understand you in the proper way. You know what I'm saying? But when I used to try to be friends with the black kids, they always like, you African this, you African booty scratcher, this and this. You know what I'm saying? What you know? And you know what I'm saying? So for me, if I see that now and I'm like, you guys have never, you know, they call me, when the racists came to me, I'm like, look, I'm from Africa. My parents have never been owned. know what I'm saying? I came here on my own. So I never really, that thing bothered me like that anyway. Like, it never got to me. Like, because I'm like, you guys are just, for me, what I feel like, black folks in America always I guess we want to feel special or feel like we take the blame, but we always want to be like, I don't know, like cuddled or taken care of.
But I think it's a little bit of victim mentality.
Yeah, we have the victim mentality.
Like
exactly.
reinforcing the negative things.
But what creates that? Like he said that there is a system. It's a systematic thing that causes.
So the system that people keep talking about, it sounds like this big mysterious thing.
No,
it's literally from the education.
It
begins in the education level of what they're
exactly.
taught in
That's
school,
what I'm talking about. A
right?
system starts with the education system.
Yes.
How communities socialize.
Exactly. How even urban planning happens.
Yeah.
That's all part of like this major system. So you find a lot of people. My sister told me she watched a video of someone who finally saw a video of Egypt, and they were like, oh my gosh, guys, Egypt has a city. This is an American person surprised that Egypt has a city. That just means their education system has not exposed them to the fact that Egypt has a city and that the whole of Africa is developed. So they're missing like years, like decades of information.
And like African Americans don't really, they've just started traveling now to actually claim Africa. 20 years ago, no one, you know what I'm saying, they looked down on Africans, you know? They looked down on us. When I was in the States going to school, black Americans,
which just shows you how they're taught about Africa. Like, it's not a racism thing even.
I know you probably
it's just they're taught negative about here.
The one time that I was in the States, I did also, first of all, I noticed, I hate to use the word, but a sort of a general ignorance concerning, you know, the sort of the world atlas.
Yes,
there's the United States, and then there's a lot of other places, continents, countries, maybe a few individuals that are known. And I think that's the first part, you know, to not really fitting into international community and international values, which I also think is why, you know, the conversation is so strong there. And most of these topics stem from there, because there's a lot of unresolved issues. And I'm just now, from what you're saying, I'm beginning to picture, you know, it might be easier for the typical African American to look down on you, seeing as he feels looked down on a daily basis. So it's easier, you know, to look at the person who's pure at heart and sort of put him aside.
Some of the pain.
Right, to share pain. You know, it's easier sometimes to be negative. I'm just
I
you know.
respect that. I respect, but still, like, I got more. For me, as a person, I feel like I got more racism from me, from my own people.
So how do we deconstruct the narrative, these narratives that are about Africa in general? How do we deconstruct this thinking that maybe this one is more superior than me, or maybe this one is more? How do we go about? What are some of the potential solutions that you think we can put in place in order to promote an equal society?
So first of all, I think we need to stop thinking we're inferior. That's the first step. I have met people who, that inferiority complex is massive, where you're reinforcing inferiority to yourself. No one is actually enforcing it to you, you're doing it to yourself. So I've met people who apologize for the type of car they have. Like, who cares? Because they feel inferior to you, so now they're like, oh, sorry, you know? So once we start that, and then we need to stop letting the world dictate who we are. Africa's been called many things. It's like everyone keeps deciding who Africa is. They labeled us a third world country. They keep throwing labels at us. They keep telling us who we are and who we aren't. So we need to take back our narrative and be like, I am this and I am that, and this is what I stand for as a person. You do not get to tell me what my culture is. You do not get to tell me how to behave. You do not get to tell me how to grow my hair, go to school. Even like how we're still using school uniforms, we're still using colonial education system. Our education system is still colonial. So why haven't we changed all of these things? These are the things we need to do in order to like reclaim our narrative and actually change and ensure that the change will last. Not just like quick fix and then it's no, this change will last, start at the bottom level.
I would agree, it's important. We need a voice of some form, and that's why I'm very thankful to the creative personalities like yourselves, because that's the beginning. It's having a channel on which, you know, you can communicate your own identity.
Too. You have to hold yourself accountable.
Yeah.
You can't just always play victim. You
That's
can't always
impossible.
play victim. You also, you gotta, sometimes you gotta be like, okay, I was in the wrong. Maybe I got treated wrong, but I was in the wrong too.
Exactly.
For me, sometimes when I got in police trouble, it's not like I was what? I wasn't in the wrong. I was in the wrong.
Yeah.
And until you agree that, okay, hold yourself accountable.
Exactly.
Yeah, then maybe we can move somewhere. When someone can apologize for their mistakes as a human being, like, okay, look, besides color, I am wrong. You know what I'm saying? I was in the wrong. And then the other person could be like, okay, look, yes, you were in the wrong, and I was in the wrong. I reacted in a different kind
I think
of way.
also
And maybe we can-
representation matters. The brands that we affiliate ourselves to play a role in reinforcing the narrative. If you look at brands like Vogue, if you look at brands like Adidas, Nike, and all these representing, if you're growing up and all you see on TV and advertisement is white people, you feel inferior.
But isn't that
So-
our problem? We need to create the representation. Adidas is just hiring who they're hiring. Who
but
began Adidas? Why don't
You know what I'm saying?
we?
Like, I don't think a company, they actually go out there and be like, don't hire black people or
It's a
don't hire
byproduct.
that person.
It's just a
exactly,
byproduct. If you start a company, there's just a way you hire people
But
in
what
a
I'm
certain
saying,
way.
the brands that dominate the mainstream are brands that invest a lot in the mainstream. You get the point? And we're talking about having kids to go through this entire process. So we need to start changing the thing that is at the top by making sure that we put in place policies that allow for representation. So that if I have a daughter that I want to watch with the show, I don't constantly be bombarded with advertisements with only white people. You get the point? I just want to see that kind of representation, and this takes an effort of brands that occupy the mainstream space, because this is where we are. You say you wake up in the morning and the first thing you see is advertisements. You see a truck passing you and that's an advertisement. You go buy a product, So we need to start putting our brands accountable. That's the first thing, because whatever they show us, especially brands that dominate the mainstream space. So when I talk about Nike, when I talk about brands like Vogue, these are things that we associate ourselves as a lifestyle,
Yeah, but for me, I feel like
TV,
a company has its model. A company, I know a company is supposed to take care of the client, but if they have their own, you don't have to come buy my thing. I know I want a client and stuff
Yeah,
like that,
exactly.
but you don't have to come buy my thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't have to.
It doesn't have to incorporate you.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to include you.
What I think
I started it. I wanted a lawyer
what
or
I think
whoever,
is the
whoever.
aspect of inclusivity. When we
No,
have
but
this
so-
conversation,
Yeah,
it's
we
like
agree.
saying,
We need to start.
Do you want to take over the
these
company
things.
because of
Yeah, no,
your
but
race?
my
You know what
my
I'm
thing
saying?
is like I
No.
feel like we need to be more innovative. We need to create situations where we can actually enforce these changes. Because every time we complain, we're like, oh, the Oscars is not inclusive. It was made by white people. Oh, this company is not inclusive. It was made by white people. Oh, this company is not inclusive. iPhone. It was made by
That's like
white
somebody
people.
coming to
We
your
need to
house.
make things.
Yes.
Telling you need to put up a picture of me
Thank
up
you,
there
Cassie.
because I come to your house often. Like, what up, bruh?
I
So
saw-
we need to create them.
So there's been this Vogue challenge, and then you see people putting themselves in the Vogue image. You get the point? And then I think I was reading someone said, this is the problem, because we want the narrative to be driven by a Western media house. You get the
So
point?
we need to push
We have
the
a lot of
narrative
young
on our
people that are
side.
actually creating. They have these magazines, and we're not supporting them. They're doing that representation for us, but we
Exactly. So that's what
gravitate
needs to
towards
happen.
something that is
why
Vogue.
you
You
would
know?
complain about somebody's business
When
if they
you-
have, if you won't go support somebody that's going to actually follow
Well, but
Exactly,
I
exactly.
think if these brands are dominating sort of like the mainstream space, they have to be accountable, and accountability means they have to be representative. Brands like Facebook, we give them our money to survive. You get the point, and that is the responsibility
No, undeniably, people with a lot of influence have responsibility. These things
At
are
least should
interdependent.
have.
They're
Should have.
interdependent. You can choose to acknowledge or deny that
Yes.
responsibility, but
Yes,
it's
yes.
there.
Yes,
I
yes.
think that's for sure. But at times, really, I look at it from a similar angle, and it's the fact that if you want to better something, you can only look at yourself first, right?
Yes.
You need to look inside yourself to find solutions. You need to ask yourself, what solutions can I put into place, not criticize those of others.
Exactly,
and there's one more thing. We have this tendency that, especially in times of trying to, find our identity, we look at issues literally too black and too white.
I agree.
It's like it's this way or that way. There's no common ground that we can sort of agree on.
No, but there's so much nuance in
and
everything.
for my personal life, right? This humble place we sit in here today would not have been possible if Germans, Ugandans had not collaborated together. Exactly. We would not be 2.5 Ugandan, 1.5 German partners trying to do something in Uganda. If we had the opportunity, if we weren't willing to look past, the exact race hurdle that we speak of in the first place. Yeah. So I think it tends to be a more complex issue than we might want to admit to ourselves in a day-to-day. And I am somehow, sometimes I feel that ultimately it will always take time. Whatever we do, it will take time.
We just have to start.
That's great. Thank you very much for being an amazing panel. It was really amazing to have you guys for the first episode of the Creative Talks Roundtable sessions, and we hope to see you. If you're there, subscribe to the Creative Talks Roundtable on YouTube, watch us, and hope to get your views about the show. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.